My first classroom was a little blue trailer on the edge of the soccer field. Every morning I got my shoes clogged with mud hiking across the field, but I loved my corner of campus and I felt pretty free to design it to work best for my students because not a lot of people made it down there. And it turned out that what really worked best for them was constant change. Our desks were attached to our chairs, so to move one was to move both. And move them I did, frequently working up a sweat between classes as I scooted them and pushed them and threw them around the room as quickly as I could, moving from circular discussion seating in one class to desks pushed up against the walls for a visiting artist in another, station seating for book clubs in one, back to circular discussion seating in another. I wanted the room to work for the task, not the task to conform to the room. And that meant staying flexible, even though I hadn't yet heard the phrase flexible seating, and I certainly didn't have any couches, yoga balls, or beanbags. I didn't even know I wanted those yet. These days, it's that word flexible that defines so much that is helpful for modern classroom design. Flexible seating, flexible displays, flexible resources. I want your students to be able to collaborate with you from day to day to create the environment that will help them shine. So, what might that look like these days? That's what we're going to be talking about in our podcast today. Oh, and one more thing before we start. Throughout this podcast and the ones to come in this little mini series that we're kicking off today, I am going to be talking about graphics and displays from the evolvingEDdesign toolkit, a vast free resource that I made for you. So I really encourage you to jump into the show notes and grab your copy of this very extensive, colorful, creative, fun resource to inspire your classroom design. Okay, let's go. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. All right, so let's start with the seating you're in your classroom. Maybe your classroom is like that first one that I had, and my second one, and my third one, full of fairly inflexible seating, which is nevertheless flexible. Whether you have tables and chairs, desks attached to chairs, or some other modern modular setup, chances are it can all be dragged around from one place to another. A classroom can be set up effectively for a lot of different situations. At times, you'll want to curate your space for what works for the plan you've got. You'll know what the class is going to feel like. You'll know what seating and spacing will work well for that. At other times, you might want to give students some freedom to curate the space for the task that they're working on, handing over some agency in the setup to help them create the environment that will help them collaborate or work alone or focus or whatever it is that they need to do. For me, there was kind of a standard toolkit of seating. I wanted desks in a circle if we were having a discussion so everybody could see each other and everybody's voice was being valued equally. If we were going to have some kind of performance, like a theater performance, or kids standing up and doing performance poetry at the front, or groups coming up to act out scenes, then I wanted seating in kind of like an arc that would allow for a makeshift stage at the front. If I was going to do stations, I want the seating in groups. Book clubs, the seating in groups. Project work, kind of depends, right? There's a lot of different layouts that can match with the different sorts of things you're doing at school. But the thing is, what I've realized over the years is that you don't have to do all the work for these rearrangements yourself. And now we're going to get to one of the first resources in the toolkit I mentioned in the intro. I have made a bunch of charts that just sort of show a layout plan for seating design that could work for your lesson for the day. So it might say discussion seating and then show a picture of a circle of desks, or it might say coffee shop seating and show desks clustered around the room, giving students flexibility. If you project a chart like that, whether you use mine or make one of your own, then as your students come in a couple minutes before class begins, they can help you. My students used to do this informally for me all the time, but I didn't have any chart projected and I had to re-explain the situation to every student who came in. You can get a leg up on me and make these transitions faster by just projecting what you want. Now, as you consider your layout for any given day, you can consider how to provide options for students within the work. So let's say your students are working independently that day and you've got it in kind of coffee shop seating. Let's think about some different ways that you can provide options for your kiddos. Maybe over on one side of the room, you could have a counter area. Now, you may not be able to get like a tall bar table kind of thing that's going to be expensive, but maybe you can just pull a table over there or two tables so that you have a long counter type of feel and you have a little bit different seating over there. So it feels a little bit like a coffee shop counter. And maybe someday in the future, you'll have some funding or a handy parent and you can build a little actual tall counter with stools. That could be a great place for students to work quietly on their own. That could be a good place to send early finishers. It's a place where a small group could go over and meet and cluster. It's a space where students could go and sit and plug in a computer and pop on their headphones and do like some media consumption task without disrupting the rest of the room. Another thing you might build into a layout for a certain day would be an area or two with resources for whatever it is that you're doing that day. Maybe you're doing performance poetry and you want to have some scattered books of poems and some blackout poetry that students have made in the past and a tablet that has a little playlist on it of 10 performance poems you love. This resource table can be something that is known to students and they just know like, hey, if you get stuck, if you need inspiration, if you just want to kind of get out of your head and think about poetry differently, like feel free to check out the resource table. You can take something back to your desk, whatever, just bring it back by the end. Maybe you want to intentionally leave certain spaces in the classroom blank and have some resources around to help students fill that blank space with ideas. If you have kids meeting in small groups trying to generate concepts for a Genius Hour project or a podcasting project or an AI research project or whatever, having an empty whiteboard with markers along the bottom or little mini chalkboards or an easel with some giant Post-its and Crayola markers, whatever, like having those spaces where student groups can go and make their thinking come alive on the paper or the chalkboard or the whiteboard, that can really help them see their ideas and kind of prototype them out and talk about them with each other so that they can find the best one. Another thing to think about is you're kind of layering your space for the day. Do you have any flexible seating? Is there any way you can make use of it on that day? I think one of the most common ways we use flexible seating in ELA is when kids are reading, giving them like a chance to sit on a couch or a pillow or a thick rug or a beanbag. But there are a lot of other times when flexible seating might be nice. Maybe some students are writing and they like to lay on their stomach when they write and they could be on the rug, or maybe two kids are editing each other's work and they could sit on pillows right side by side, like really leaning into each other and talking. All these things are just fun things to think about. A lot of times I see students post, not students. A lot of times I see teachers post over in Creative High School English with questions about how they might spend budget. So now we're going to come into the next part of the podcast here a little bit and talk about how you might spend budget if you have it on your classroom space in terms of flexible seating. I have been reading Scott Dorley and Scott Withoff's book from the Stanford D School, which is called Make Space, about creating collaborative and creative spaces at the D School and beyond. And one of my favorite easy tips they share is to add caster wheels to the bottom of furniture. At the D School, they have all these red IKEA couches with little wheels screwed onto the bottom. And I think this is so interesting and fun. And that is the first thing I want to suggest if you have some budget. Is there something in your room that you really wish could roll around? Could you just buy a little kit of caster wheels and screw them onto the bottom of said thing? That could be really cool. But we won't stop there. Flexible seating comes in so many flavors. It's important to think at the outset before you make any purchases about colors and fabrics that will wear well, or covers for whatever you're going to buy, right? The last thing you want is to finally have the budget for some beautiful couch or to have one donated that you're super excited about and then see it get a huge stain on it on the second Tuesday. So think about, black, think about brown, think about covers, but at the same time, think about what's fun and what goes with your classroom. You don't only have to get black furniture and bean bags and pillows, but building up your collection of flexible seating over time can be a really fun, interesting way to provide different forms of collaboration through the space that you're teaching in. I know as English teachers, we are often wanting to earmark all of our budget for books, but today we're going to talk about some other options too. All right, another thing I want you to think about in terms of your classroom design is how you can support student work with your displays. Now, displays can be so many different things. One thing that we know is that displays on the walls of student work that reflect back their creative effort back to them, let them see each other's ideas, let them see each other's excellence, can be really helpful. Another thing we know is that giving students different creative things to look at from outside the discipline that they're focused on, from outside the problem that they're considering, that helps expand their mind. It helps them come up with new ideas and new solutions and more creative thinking than if they entirely stay focused within the discipline they're in. So that's another thing to think about when you're showcasing something on your walls, right? This is something I learned about from Zorana Pringle when she was a guest a few weeks ago, and she talked about just how important it is to present diverse ideas and viewpoints to students. And then it was reinforced for me recently when I was watching the Stanford D School Masters of Creativity video series on their YouTube channel. And the very first one was all about creative input and like how much it helps when you get ideas from lots of places and you just are exposed to many ideas and when you're trying to be creative. So this is also something to consider when you're creating your displays. And because there are so many different things that can be wonderful on your wall, resources, scaffolds, student work, varied creative artifacts from all different disciplines, I really want to recommend that you consider having flexible displays on your wall. If you've ever, like me, spent a very long time putting a bunch of stuff up with tape and then realize that it's going to become outdated quite soon and you're going to have to take all those little sticky tapes off and throw them all away and then do it all over again, you know that it feels a bit like a waste of time. You want to have the display, you just don't want to deal with the tape. And so I have 3 go-tos when it comes to creating displays that all take that pressure and time suck element out of creating displays. So the first one, and my favorite, this is absolutely what I think should be in every classroom, is a simple line with clothespins on it. So you put up 2 command hooks or like little silver hooks that you get at the hardware store for 29 cents. And you tie a piece of string in between them. And then you hang tiny clothespins, which you can get at any craft store again for like $1.29, all along the line. I have these in my house. I hang my own like art and ideas on them. I hang my kids' art and ideas on them. I hadn't thought of this yet or seen this yet when I was in the classroom. It's something that really came out of my early life as a parent. And now I just think it's brilliant. You can do this all across a wall. You could have 70 hooks across one wall if you did your lines in rows or if you did them in zigzags. And then it honestly takes 2 seconds to hang something up. You just push the little clip and pop in the beautiful whatever or the inspiring whatever. It's so easy. It's the easiest thing. So I really recommend that. Next thing that I want to say is that bulletin boards can be wonderful. Huge bulletin boards, a gallery of bulletin boards. Consider whether you want to get backing for your bulletin boards. I often see beautiful papers at stationery stores that make me want to put them behind bulletin boards. But there's also this very big company that sort of dominates the market of bulletin board backing on Amazon. I think it's called Better Than Paper or something like that. But if you type in bulletin board paper, you'll see it, and also have it linked in the toolkit that I am giving you with this episode if you want it. But these rolls of Better Than Paper come in a million different flavors, textures, looks, and you can put them up to cover your corkboard if your corkboard has gotten kind of ugly over the years or if it has little pieces missing. And that can really make your bulletin board fun, and then all you have to do is scatter on a bunch of pins and boom, you're ready to display work on it. The other really fun one that I've seen over the years, but this one takes probably the most effort of the 3 to get set up. It's still going to be quick once you have it set up, is to pick up frames at like rummage sales, Goodwill, wherever, spray paint them all the same color or don't, and then pop them up on the wall again with like a little wire in between or a piece of string in between the 2 sides of the frame, and again, a clip. And now you have these cool frames. You can change out the art, the work, the photos, the poems, the introductory paragraphs, whatever you're wanting to showcase as incredible that week. All you have to do is just, once again, push the little top of your clothespin and pop it in there. And you can create this flexible display really quickly. All right. I have created a couple of displays for you that are ready to go within the toolkit. I will pop a picture of them into the show notes so you can see. One is all about encouraging risk-taking in students, all about sort of trying to get them to think in terms of their own creative options. We know from the research, again, Zorana Ivčević-Pringle talked about this with us a few weeks ago on the podcast, that when we tell students we want them to be creative, it helps remove the roadblock that they feel where they're trying to guess what we want, and it actually allows them to be creative. So I really tapped into that with this display. Creative risks welcome, creative thinkers needed. Mistakes are just the first sign of progress. Every good idea starts as a new idea. They're just like fun, colorful posters to reinforce this idea that it's okay to try something new and it's actually good. The other one is more going to be a student curated display for your classroom. And this is where we're talking about this idea that kids tend to be more creative and adults, if they have a lot of creative input from lots of different places, right? Like we were talking about before. So this display has a poster for the middle that says, what do you find inspiring? And then it has headers for people, places, words, and images. And you can either invite students to help you co-curate this exhibit on your wall, or you can assign it and you can say, look, find something that you find inspiring from any field, from any artist, street art, music, architecture, words, quotes, products, startup companies, anything, nonprofits, organizations, heroes of yours. Send me an image or send me a quote or send me an article by email tonight, and I'm going to print them and I'm going to put them up on the wall. Or you can ask them to cut them out of magazines or newspapers or whatever, but a lot of our exploration is digital these days. So this might end up being a thing where you have to do some printing, but then you can have students help you put it all up into your display so that they really have that sense of ownership over the display. And it will also be really wide ranging, right? They're going to think of things that are inspiring that you would never have thought of. And that's really great to have their vision of inspiration on your classroom wall. Okay, my friend, we're coming to the end. Today, this first podcast in the new Evolving EDdesign series was all about setting up a flexible space in your classroom to support collaborative, creative work. We've got flexible seating layouts. We've got different possibilities for building more flexible seating itself into the classroom. We've got this concept of flexible displays, and we're trying to get up on the walls creative work, scaffolds for work, exemplars, creative inspiration from all around the world and from interdisciplinary locations. And all of this together is going to create this framework where your space is really going to support the kinds of creative work that you want to do with your students in class. Next week, we're going to go to the next step. We're going to be talking about how to create more agency for your students in the choices that they make inside this creative classroom space. So I'll be excited to see you there. And until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.